first. What does it mean to be the first? To do anything. We reserve a special respect for those people who clear the path and chart a course that no one else has traveled. The rewards, the accolades, and I'm guessing the personal sense of pride are enormous. But so are the challenges and the struggles. In the following conversations, we will celebrate those Minnesotans, African Americans all, who stand out because they were first. Chosen by the Council on Black Minnesotans, we will talk briefly with 6 of Minnesota's finest, pioneers, groundbreakers, and if you're wondering why it's important to mark the lives and careers of these esteemed members of our community, consider the history of this country. Our first accomplished it in spite of barriers and obstacles many of us would not be able to overcome, but they did. I wanted to know, among other things, if being first was a part of their consciousness, what was happening in their minds and hearts, and what being first means to them now. Sharon Sales Belton grew up in the Twin Cities. She obviously cultivated a love for social service, activism, and Minneapolis. A Macalester College graduate, she served on the Minneapolis City Council for 10 years, rising to council president in 1990. In 1994, Sharon Sales Belton became the first African American and the first female mayor in the 140-year history of Minneapolis. Good afternoon. The Honorable Sharon Sales Belton, former mayor of Minneapolis. And we're here to talk about being first. You're the first African-American mayor of the city of Minneapolis. So what does it mean to be first at something if you're as an African-American person?
You know, I don't know that I think about it a lot, but if I reflect on it a little bit, I would say that it reflects hard work. It reflects being focused and determination. And I think that when I look back at the instances where I've been first, it was really because I worked hard at it, I was focused. I don't think I was ever trying to be the first. I was just trying to be good at what I wanted to do or what was important to me. One of the things I like to tell people when they ask the question about being the first is, you know what, the goal is not to be the first.
Right.
I don't want to be the one and only.
Right.
I don't want to be the one and only. I'm the first, that's cool, but the goal and the objective was to create the opportunity for others. Because if you're the one and only, you've done something one time. Where's the impact in that? That's cool, but history will turn the page on that, and then things will still be the same. And that's not what I'm interested. I'm not interested in things being the same. I'm interested in change.
Did you know when you decided to run for mayor? I mean, of course, you knew you were going to be the first African-American mayor if you won. But how much of that process, how much of that knowledge that you would be first played into the way you ran your campaign or your desire to be mayor? How did that work?
There are times in and out of that process where I thought about, wow, if I win, I'll be the first woman elected. If I win, I'll be the first African American elected, and what will that mean? And for me, I'll tell you the honest truth. It was definitely going to be one of those breakthrough events. But,
and you knew that?
And I knew that. I knew that. But I also knew that if I did this, there would be others.
Yes.
If I could do this, then other people could do it. Somebody has to kind of break through the glass ceiling, so to speak. Somebody has to help eliminate or move the barriers aside. And then once one person does that, there's an opportunity for other people to be able to walk through that door. I was committed to try my darndest to get that door open so that other people could walk
What's
through.
the nature of that commitment?
I don't know. I think it was really something that was just kind of instilled in me, from kind of way back in my days as a girl growing up in St. Paul. My experience came out of the old Rondo neighborhood and watching my own family and watching my own community, watching the adults around me just be absolute champions for quality of life, healthy children, strong community, and they fought to, kind of protect our community. And I also watched them, leverage a great fight, but lose. But a lot of lessons were learned in that process. The biggest lesson was you do have a voice. Now, there are a lot of people who don't want to listen to your voice. There are a lot of people who don't care about what you're saying, but you do have a voice, and you have the responsibility to use that voice.
You learned this growing up.
I learned this growing up. I watched this role modeled from all the people who lived in my community. The lesson learned was you can't stand on the sideline. You can't stand on the sideline and just be a whiner and a griper. If you want something to change, you have to step in and get involved and work hard to try to change it.
So from the point of sort of discerning commitment, understanding what the community and its significance to you, what was the process by which you constructed the aspects of your life that led you on the path that you took?
There's a lot that I could choose, but I think the one that I will mention is going with a group of college students down to Jackson, Mississippi to do voters registration. I had never really seen, poverty. I'd never really talked to somebody whose constitutional rights, whose basic rights guaranteed to them by the Constitution, were being denied them. And to have people tell me that my life was in jeopardy, I can't talk to you because I could be hurt, I could be killed, my family could be harmed. Please don't let anybody see you at my door. When I came back to Minnesota after having that experience and I got back to my, organizing back at home and I was knocking on people's doors and saying, hey, I'm registered to vote, and people would say, I don't really want to vote or I don't really care, I was furious.
You had, yes.
I was absolutely furious. Excuse me, you have nothing to risk.
Yes.
Nobody is going to burn your house down. Nobody is going to deny you a job because you vote. You need to vote because you need to be involved. You're complaining about this. You're upset about that. The least you can do is to fill out this form and go down once a year and vote for change.
Right. Obviously, in the way that you see your career, it is as a woman and as an African-American woman.
Yeah.
And so there's some aspect of this that I'm really curious about this first, because you were also the first woman mayor.
Yes.
And so how do the issues of gender relate to the struggle of or the course of your career?
For me, I was kind of coming up right at the time of Black Power and right at the time of feminism. So both of these issues were really very important to me. I knew Black women were being marginalized and discriminated against, as were my white counterparts, right? I knew Blacks as a whole were being discriminated against, which is why we needed to have an empowerment movement and Black Power. So I have all these things going on. We won't talk about the middle where the flower children were all trying to do their own thing too. But let's just talk about these two political issues. And I decided that I would probably spend as much energy on working on Black empowerment as I would on feminist issues. So I was very actively involved. Very actively involved in domestic violence and sexual assault as one of the founders of Harriet Tubman's Shelter for Battered Women. And I remember when we were working on some of those issues, those folks that really didn't know me, wanted to call me a radical feminist. Well, okay, if that's what it means to be a radical feminist, that you are going to go and fight against domestic violence and try to educate women to keep them from being victims of sexual assault, I will be your radical feminist. I will take that.
Was there anything that happened? I'm sure there was at least one thing, probably more than one, over the course of your career, or still even in your career, that challenged you to a point where you had to exert some special energy to get over it, around it, some that you had to deal, some barrier or obstacle that sort of stood as a potential to thwart your dream?
Now, there's a policy decision that I made that I couldn't talk about openly that was a really tough one. And where I really felt as a public leader, I felt intimidated. I wasn't the mayor at the time. I was a member of the city council. And I was advocating for civilian review of police conduct. And it was the day of the vote. We had a long process, a lot of citizen engagement, a lot of public hearings. But the decision was coming to a head, and a vote was going to be then made by the city council. And on the day that the decision was going to be made, a number of people from law enforcement, including some people who, are, my friends, today, they all walked in the room, kind of all single file, all in their crisp uniforms and everything. Everybody, was armed. They had their guns on and everything. And they walked in the room or whatever, and they were all standing uniformly and, on a dime. I don't know if somebody snapped their fingers or what, but on a dime, they all sat down, right? And you could hear that heavy metal hitting that wood seat, and it was like a hard clunk. And it was like, oh my gosh, what's happening here? But even with that show of force, we really believed that it was important for the public to have confidence in the fact that we were thoroughly reviewing, cases where people believed that there was police misconduct. And that was as much important to the public as, in my opinion, it was for law enforcement. Because I think law enforcement is an important, part of the community. They're essential, services. We trust, these individuals to look out for us and for our children and our families and our community. And we have to trust them at the highest level. And that trust had been broken, and I wanted to do something to try to build that trust back. And I felt like the Review Authority had the potential to do that. They had a different view, some of them, and so that day it was like, okay, Sharon, here it's going down right now. And as it turned out, it was okay. I made it through the day, and we went on to.
But that day sticks out to you.
But that day sticks out because, again, it was a test. It was one of those tests. What do you believe in, and why do you believe it? And as I said, I believe in the law enforcement. I was a parole officer.
But you believe in change.
And I believe in change. I believe in responsibility and accountability. Mm-hmm. I believe that we all need to be, held accountable, and we are all responsible to each other and for each other. And I think in all the messages that I've ever provided to anyone, be they a child or to an adult, it's really about personal responsibility and taking charge.
Well, I think your career speaks to that sense of personal responsibility and accountability and activism and engagement. I mean, there's no one who can look at your resume and your list of actions and not think that. So it is a great honor to have this conversation with you. I really appreciate it.
I enjoyed it a lot.
William Corky Finney was born in St. Paul and raised in the city's famous Rondo Summit University neighborhood. A lifelong resident of the city, while still a police officer, he was elected to the St. Paul School Board in 1989 and served 3 years. And then, after 21 years on the police force, he was named chief of St. Paul's Police Department in 1992, the first African American to hold that position. Former police chief, William Finney, first black police chief, St. Paul, Minnesota.
In Minnesota.
In Minnesota. What does that mean?
It's a great honor. St. Paul is my hometown. I always felt it to be an honor to be a police officer in my town and be able to make differences through my individual effort. But to become police chief of the city of St. Paul was, oh boy.
Yeah.
Now I've got a lot of people who I respected, who I learned from, a lot of people who were like extended family in the city, who are all right there with me. So in my appointment, I said, I stand on the shoulders of many people who came before me who have prepared the ground for me to become police chief. And I want to do them proud. There are a lot of people that wished me well, were there to support me, and there were some that were there to throw some rocks along the way, but that was to be expected.
You felt pressure right from the beginning. I mean, and I characterize that as pressure. Pressure can have a positive and a negative impact on you.
Sure. The positive is that you have the opportunity to carry an organization to another level, a vision of being a more full-service organization that serves the entire community better. The negative is, because you're a first, if you fall on your face,
Yes.
then everyone says, those that were detractors to begin with said, see,
Yeah.
you're not prepared. This is a affirmative action appointment and not somebody who is suited or capable of doing the job. And so then that reflects, unfortunately, it reflects on so many people who happen to look like me.
What does the African American part of this first mean to you?
Everything. What it meant to me was crashing down barriers that were strong obstacles. I mean, fortress walls. It was difficult in Minnesota to see very many African Americans, blacks in law enforcement. It was there, but you got to a certain point and couldn't go any higher. I was the second African American sergeant on the St. Paul Police Department. First was my mentor, and I call him Uncle Jim S. Griffin. And he made it in 1954 when he got on the police department in 1941. Took him to 54. He never was a lieutenant, but he made captain in 1970. I was the first African American lieutenant, and I made it in 1982.
So you saw barriers ahead of you.
Oh, huge.
Did you see them? I mean, did you know as you were progressing through the force that there was a downward pressure that existed? Do you think that there was a downward pressure and a natural systemic reality that would sort of limit your career aspirations?
Yeah, absolutely.
You saw it.
I saw it. I knew it was there. And to me, I'm a bit of I challenge those things. I'm not one of those people that say, when they say to me, you don't know your place, I say, you're absolutely right, I don't know. I said, I'm going to explore until I find the place I want to be in. I said, I'm going to work to get there and prepare, and then if I get to that level, I'm going to work hard to be successful at it, because that's how I was raised. And so, yeah, I knew there were barriers. And when you're confronted with a barrier, especially those expected barriers, you have a choice. You can go around it, left or right. You can go over it, or you can go under it, or you can crash through it. But I'm going to get past the barrier. And so that was something I always did, and I was able to have people that aided me along the way. I would never say that Bill Finney did it on his own. I had a lot of allies. A lot of them were community members, extended family, people that wished me well, and there were some people that along the way who were majority members who said, let me help you. And you have to be willing to understand that, to hear it, to learn from mentorship wherever it comes.
Yes.
And to put it into action and never let those people down.
Yes. So, I mean, in the short conversation I've had with you, even now, a sense of integrity sort of exudes from your character, the way you express yourself. Where does that integrity come from? That sense of integrity, the sense of rightness.
From its earliest beginnings, my mother and father. I was blessed to have two parents. I had a very, very strong mother.
You think that's important?
Oh, I think you are what you're taught to be. I think that your environment has a great deal with making you the person you are, especially in the foundation, formative years. And I was always brought up by a family, extended family. My mother had 6 sisters, and my father was one of 11 children. My father was 50 years older than me, 20 years older than my mother. So I had all these old-fashioned notions and degrees of integrity, and they simply had any choice. Boy, you're going to obey the law, and you're going to be good. Oh, you're going to go to college. Now, whether or not you graduate, kid, is up to you, but you're going to go, and you're not ever going to go to jail. Do you understand that? Nobody in our family's ever gone to jail, and you won't be the first. Well, I believed my mother and father, and I was scared of my mother. She should have been the cop.
Maybe she was, in fact, the cop. Can you think of one specific event that made a huge difference in your life?
in my maturation process.
Yeah.
But the whole civil rights era, Brown versus Board of Education. Oh, that's a big one. Some of the Supreme Court decisions. People like Thurgood Marshall. Oh, hero.
All right, so the other side of that equation is there's always something that you had to overcome that could have stopped you.
Oh, yeah.
Can you? Is there a specific thing that you can point to that you're really proud, happy that you weren't waylaid by that, or that you overcame that? What did you overcome?
I can remember my first night on patrol in Mankato, where I was working with an individual who must have drawn the short straw. Didn't want to work with me. And as I sat on the right side of the squad car, he sat looking out the left side and forward and drove in the squad car. After about 2 hours of silence, I asked him, "What does he want me to do here?" He says, as he pulled to the curb, "What I want you to do, I want you to sit there, shut up, and don't touch nothing on my blankety-blank squad car. You got that?" I said, "Well, having some college education, yes, I understand that. Sit here, shut up, and don't touch anything on your car." I said, "You and I wear the same uniform. I'm full-time and you're not." Fine. That was like that until we got called to a fight call. And I knew the tough guys from the college, and these are football players, and they were fighting at a local bar. And he got out and told me to sit in the car. At that time, I was in a lot better shape than I am now, and I was a power lifter. And he went out and got knocked down, completely out of. I went out, I talked to the individuals, I muscled them over to the car, sat there in the back of the car, they settled down, then I went over and dusted my partner off and had him squared away before the other squads arrived, which he was kind of embarrassed. Nobody ever said he got knocked down, and his name will remain nameless. But after that, nobody better ever say anything bad about me in that whole police circle down there. And there wasn't many cops down there. It was like about 45. But he saw a different perspective. And so I said, okay, if I can awaken this individual who was a bigoted individual, very bigoted, if I can open his eyes, then I saw that as an opportunity to open others. And so that was a watershed event for me in terms of law enforcement. And it could have been very, very negative. I could have just said, take this badge and shove it. I don't need this. Right? You're everything I thought you were. But instead I said, fine. I'm not going to let them run me off. In my experience with St. Paul Police, same way. There have been many things that were designed to break one's spirit. And some of them were nasty, but you move on. There were attacks once I became chief. That didn't end, it just took on a different sophistication. But you go on and understand that you're there representing a larger institution. You're representing the organization, but more importantly, you're representing the people of the city.
Yeah, that's what I knew you were going to say. And also, I think under even that or alongside that is family and community underneath even the city.
That's my fortress of solitude. When
Yeah,
I
the
go
fortress of
home,
solitude.
yes, I'd go home and my wife, and my family would help me get through that evening, a negative evening, and prop me up so I was prepared after getting up in the morning to go forward and do it again.
Any regrets to the whole arc of your career?
None.
None.
I never was alone. I found that becoming a police officer sometimes made me transcend from being just a regular black dude to being someone that majority of people would respect, because citizens of St. Paul really respect their cops. Even the bad guys do. They don't like them, but the bad guys respect St. Paul Police, and that comes from most of those officers working very, very closely with community members to earn that, and you have to earn it every day. Those little things that you can do along the way to help someone was reward for me.
Well, Chief William Bill Finney, it's a pleasure to have this opportunity to talk to you about your career. First black police chief in St. Paul City, first black police chief in the state of Minnesota. Archie Givens is the president and CEO of Legacy Management and Development Corporation, and he's also the president of the Givens Foundation for African American Literature, the first African American family foundation dedicated exclusively to celebrating Black literature and writers. The Givens Foundation provides the Anderson Library at the University of Minnesota with a collection of over 10,000 rare and first edition books by African American writers. Archie Givens, founder of the Givens Foundation, which is the first African American family foundation in the state of Minnesota. And I mean, your career stretches over a lot of different areas, and I kind of want to talk about all of them.
Sure.
But I really want to focus on the Givens Foundation and its work with African American literature. Okay. So, welcome, first of all.
Thank you.
And so when I say all of that, particularly this idea about being first, what does that mean to you?
Gosh, first is kind of an onerous title.
Onerous.
And carries a lot of obligation and responsibility, I think, to live up to those first things that you can pass on, most important, but also carry forth. And so it's an honor to be in that category of first.
When you were thinking about the foundation, when your family was coming together and talking about that, what were you thinking?
You know, it really started with my mother and father, and we'd sit around the kitchen table and we're thinking about, you know, how can we give back as a family? And we were particularly interested in those days in scholarships, helping minority students who had some interest in career fields that my dad was in, healthcare and housing. So we really focused on that. And then after he died, we sort of thought about how can we make this an ongoing community effort, not just something for us to be responsible for, but to broaden it so the community is responsible. So we really thought hard about what could be, and then all of a sudden the what could be came to us, and it was one of those, you know, moments that, oh, this could be something very special.